Hey guys, Will here. Today I'm going to go into why I think house prices can double in the next 5 years. Yes, this might seem totally the opposite to how the market is feeling right now. I'm partially doing this just to document it and look back in 5 years' time just to see what actually happens versus whatever the topics I'm going to talk about in today's video. It might seem extremely illogical given the current market sentiment, so I'm going to break down the theory into the main factors of why I think this can happen. I've been thinking about house prices for a long time. Good times for the housing market generally means it's good times for my business, so it makes sense for me to keep tabs on the housing market. In 2020, something major happened that no one paid attention to which I'm going to attempt to explain to you. Everyone had their eyes diverted to the pandemic and the world's response to it. In March 2020, Virgin Airlines were the first to put their hands up and say, we're in trouble and we only have a month's worth of cash left. I'm not even sure if we'd even started lockdowns then. My immediate thought was, how is such a massive company like this only operating with so little cash? This case was not just an Australian thing, it was happening all around the Western world. And the Western world's response was announcing huge stimulus packages. All these places like the US, Canada, all of Europe, including the UK, New Zealand, and right here in Australia, just created 20 to 30% of the money supply out of thin air. Here's the data showing the Australian money supply. At the end of the day, all the stimulus spending greatly contributed to the recent price spike. I want to show you a clip from last year which explains this concept. I love the term liquidity in money because it is a great comparison, right? With liquidity, the earth needs liquid, right? We need rain. It fills our rivers, it provides life to everything. So I got this jug of water here. And with this jug of water, I'm going to show you how house prices are going to go up in the future. That's a pretty dubious claim, but let me explain. Liquidity is used in financial terms a lot. And I actually love that term because liquidity is what gives the earth life, right? Without rain, our rivers don't get full and everything needs water to survive. We need the water for life. So I want you to think of this water. We need it for our society. This water represents all the money in our society, right? You might think here these things are measurements for the amount of water, and that's fine. What I'd like you to do is look at these measurements and just assume they're house prices. Because actually, if you don't have the water, which is if you don't have any money, you can't measure house prices in terms of money. So every time you hear, stimulus for the coronavirus, money printing, QE, central bank buying bonds, central banks expanding the balance sheet, fiscal stimulus, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on. It basically amounts to the same thing. And what they're actually doing is they're just creating more of this money. So in the last year or year and a half since Corona, they're estimated to have printed, 20, 30% more of our money supply. So basically what this means, I want to show you, is they're just picking up this additional liquid money and tipping it in to the rest of the economy. So whilst in April, May last year, all of my clients and everyone looking at buying and even the banks are saying, well, we think the house prices are going to crash. I'm looking at all the money getting poured into society and I'm saying, well, no, house prices are going to keep going up. And this is going to continue to happen because if you do your research and you get to the bottom of it, the only solution these guys have got is to tip more money in. I really like that clip because it just shows the mechanical way in which house prices will keep rising. What I want to double back to, however, is Virgin Airlines having no money, because this to me was when everything changed. I thought, hang on, if all of these companies need government money to keep on operating because they're holding next to no cash, not even to get themselves through a few bad months, then this is not good. Then the stimulus rolled out. They use the word stimulus like it's going to be something that's used for a project that will help grow the economy. What I found was that if you swap the word stimulus for welfare, it's probably more appropriate. Let me just explain that point a bit further. And I'll explain it from a personal finance point of view. If you have someone who's spending more than what they're earning and they're in trouble, you wouldn't give them a handout and think they're just going to turn things around. This is the game that's being played right now at a global level. Now, stay with me here because this is where the property market gets the rocket fuel it needs to go off. If companies are not operating well, eventually stimulus money will stop flowing through the economy as we're seeing now. Then company earnings will eventually start decreasing. If earnings decrease, then the value of those companies start decreasing. To put it in another way, the stock market crashes. On top of this, companies start cutting jobs in order to survive through an oncoming recession. We're already seeing it in America right now. This is when the politicians start doing something because companies start cutting jobs, and if there's a surefire way to get voted out, that's by managing skyrocketing unemployment. Guess what the solution to the problem is? Sorry to interrupt the video. I hope you're really liking it. If I could get you to like and subscribe, that'd be awesome. I'd really appreciate it. What would be really appreciated as well is if you agree with me or don't agree with me, if you could leave a comment in the description or in the notes below, that'd be really appreciated. I realize this is a controversial topic, so it's going to be really good for me to go back to later on. Where I'm right, I'm going to be vindicated. Where I'm wrong, I'm going to learn a whole lot. Guess what the solution to the problem is? More stimulus. The question here is, how much more stimulus will the government create? To be honest, it's not simply going to be double the money supply. If I took what I think is a conservative stab in the dark, I would say another 30% over a 5-year time frame might do it. But that alone won't get the housing market to double. So let's take a look at some other factors that will contribute to this. Remember the oversupply we had in the apartment market about 5 years ago? Probably not, but just trust me, there was a shortage, I should say oversupply in the apartment market about 5 years ago. That oversupply ended with the saga we had over developers using poorly made imported building supplies, which made those buildings unsafe for people to live in. Basically, they were death traps. This led to a tightening of industry standards, which in turn led to less buildings getting built. Actually, the approvals for dwellings excluding houses has been in a downward spiral since 2016. Now we're seeing articles telling us we're on the cusp of an apartment market shortage. On top of this, we have not just skyscraper developers like Grollo and ProBuild, which have gone bankrupt. We also have rumblings that the whole industry is shaky. Builders are finding it hard to manage the fluctuation in building supplies and the increasing cost of labor. So both the increasing cost to build and the shortage of supply in housing are going to contribute to this next bull leg of the property market. To add to the housing shortage is the next factor, which is increasing population growth. One little hack our governments have used in the past is to show us how well our economy is performing. And they do that through constantly immigrating skilled workers. Let me explain. We assume that everything is constant apart from immigration, which was at 2%. So the population growth is 2%. You would expect our GDP, which is the total amount of what we spend as a nation, to rise by 2%. Basically, what I'm saying is that immigration has helped hide the underperformance of our economy, and therefore you can bet your bottom dollar that immigration will be back to at least pre-pandemic levels. If you believe that, then you also must believe that it will create further demand on the property market in the coming years. We know the immigration tap is going to be turned back on soon. With estimates, we're going to have over 200,000 new Australians from immigration every year. All of these people are going to need housing, of which there is already a shortage of. Government grants and schemes are accelerating as prices continue to increase. House prices go up, the government comes to the rescue with more schemes and money. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Labor just got voted into government with a promise to make a scheme available to first home buyers where they co-buy the property with the home buyer and take up to a 40% share in the purchase of that property. The thing is, governments realize that if the property market fails, it's going to expose how bad things actually are in the economy. So pretend and extend is the rule here. And they've been extending first home buyer grants since the year 2000 when little Johnny Howard first introduced the first homeowner grant. People don't get what a big deal this is for property prices because they don't get leverage. An extra $10,000 in grant money doesn't seem like a lot, but with $10,000 you can potentially leverage, meaning you can potentially borrow an extra $100,000 against it. Extending these grants and schemes is as close as what you can get to guaranteed in these uncertain times. Governments love keeping our unemployment rates down. One classic way of doing this is by infrastructure spending, and our state and federal governments have ramped up infrastructure spending like you wouldn't believe. At its core, infrastructure allows for more production. More production for businesses means they have more profit, which they can pay their skilled employees more for. And when people get paid more, they can pay more for property. This is why property costs more in big cities. The better the infrastructure, the more attraction it has for more businesses, and that creates demand for skilled work. That is how property goes up long term as a result of infrastructure creation. How it goes up short term is the construction of that infrastructure. That is the infrastructure spending. The construction of infrastructure always requires more jobs. That's why governments are spending money in the first place. I want to ask you a question here. Do you wonder why there is a job shortage right now? Partly it's because there are all these jobs that are reliant on government spending. This shortage of supply of jobs means that wages will get pushed up, which we're long overdue for. Rising wages growth will generally mean people can pay more for housing. This can be avoided by governments by raising interest rates accordingly, which means despite higher incomes, people cannot borrow more. Unfortunately, this is a key to the problems in our economy. One of the major factors as to why people spend money is something called the wealth effect. Spending is very important to government because that makes our GDP go up, and that is a major KPI for our performance. This ensures rising interest rates won't be a problem for long. Let me spell it out. Rising interest rates means lower house prices, which means people feel less wealthy and then spend less. Lower spending means lower GDP. 2/4 of lower GDP means we are back in recession town. In my opinion, rates will eventually have to come back down, which means people are going to be able to borrow more. This added demand into the property market means it can add fuel to the next housing boom. What do I think? I think we can see 50 to 100% gains over the next 5 years once we get through this hard period that's about to hit. A common theme which I haven't mentioned is that we're going into a stage of monetary expansion. Said in another way, we have to inflate the debt away. People all around the world are waking up to this and are starting to buy things which will hold value over time. There are many different assets you can buy to achieve this, but here in Australia, we only think one asset exists, that's property. It's ultimately going to drive this market to unthinkable highs. Is this a good thing? No, it's going to create more problems than what we have now, but I think it has a good chance of happening anyway. That's it for me today, guys. I'd like to ask you what you thought about this video. I know it's going to cause some triggering out there, but if you have any opinions that don't match with mine or are a little bit different, I'd love it if you could please comment and elaborate. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you next time. Cheers.